Hello, and welcome to this eSchool News webcast. My name is Andrew Barber, Senior Contributing Editor, and I'll be acting as the moderator for today's presentation, which is sponsored by Extreme Networks. It's titled, How to Be Successful with Chromebooks in K-12 Education. Before I introduce our speakers, I want to take a few moments to highlight a couple of items. First, today's event will be recorded. In a couple of days, you'll receive an email from us containing a link to the recorded event, and you'll also be able to download a PDF of the presentation at that point. And second, please do ask questions, and don't feel as if you have to wait until the end. At any time during the presentation, if you have a question, just type it into the Q&A box on your console and hit the Submit button. I hope to have 10 minutes, maybe 15 at the end when our speakers can answer your questions. We do have a chat function, which can be launched via the brown group chat icon at the bottom of your screen. Use chat to talk among yourselves or to contact me or the eSchool News team with any technical issues or other concerns. But please don't use the chat function to ask the panelists questions. They simply don't have time to monitor the chat during the presentation. So please do use that Q&A panel instead. With that out of the way, I want to welcome our speakers. We have three of them today. Bob Nilsson is Director of Vertical Solutions Marketing at Extreme Networks. Bob has more than 30 years experience in marketing IT systems to global 1,000 companies worldwide. Our second speaker is Edward Doan, a Senior Technical Program Manager at Google in Austin. His primary focus is helping businesses and schools deploy cloud computing with Google Chrome OS and Google Apps. He's also an adjunct professor of management information systems at the University of Texas at Austin McCombs School of Business. And our third speaker, Mark Nelson, has been with Romeo Community Schools in Michigan for 18 years, 10 years as technology director and 8 as systems engineer. Romeo has been a Google Apps for Education district since July 2011. Without further ado, let me turn it over to Bob Nilsson. Welcome, Bob. It's an honor to have you here today.
Thank you, Andrew. Chromebooks first appeared on our radar screen back in the middle of 2011 when they were announced by Google. At that time, I'd say they looked interesting, as everything that Google does is, but the concept seemed reminiscent of netbooks, which at the time were not terribly successful. But the following year, something happened. Chromebooks were appearing at our K-12 customer sites, and those customers were loving them. Something had happened between the time that netbooks had struggled and Chromebooks took off. And it looks like those things where mobile processors got more powerful, the software and apps improved and could more easily run on the mobile processors. But perhaps most importantly, Wi-Fi became available almost everywhere, at least indoors. And nowhere are the Chromebooks more popular and better suited than for K-12 education. The stats are saying that more than 1 million Chromebooks were shipped to this market in the third quarter of 2014 alone. And IDC announced that Chromebooks are now the best-selling device for K-12 schools in this country. To find out what's going on out there, we ran a survey last quarter and talked to our customers and, in fact, the market as a whole. And we posted the full results at our blog, including this infographic, but some of the things just jump right out. For example, only 14% of school districts that we talked to do not plan to use them, with the vast majority using them or planning to use them right now, and 26% considering using them. Currently, it looks like they're concentrated in grades 6 through 12, but 20% of districts are using them in all grades. And we found several districts that are using as many as 50,000 Chromebooks in their district. We asked a couple other questions about how the programs are being implemented, and we found a few districts, very few though, offered device insurance program to the students. And most of the districts, when the students graduate, they have to return the devices back. But again, you can see the full results of the survey at our blog, at our website. A word about extreme networks. Our product line includes the full portfolio from edge to core, Wi-Fi and wired network hardware and software. And while network infrastructure is often viewed as simply an expense to the school district, we view it as a strategic asset. Done right, the network is the key to providing the best student learning environment and supporting the instructional needs of the faculty and staff. A strong network infrastructure is vital to implementing the new styles of learning, including things like the flipped classroom, rich digital content, digital textbooks, one-to-one programs, BYOD programs, especially implementing online assessment, and in general, creating a personalized learning environment. So I can't stress how important the education market is to extreme networks. We've sold into over 1,400 school districts, have 20,000 schools and 6 million students. In fact, education customers account for about a quarter of our sales. So now let me turn it over to Edward. Edward?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Edward Doan, and Bob, thanks a lot for the introduction. So as previously mentioned, I'm a senior technical program manager at Google based out of Austin, Texas, and I have been working with the Chromebook product since its inception in 2011. So let me talk a little bit about Chromebooks use cases and also how Chromebooks are deployed. So this is deployment. You see lots of Chromebooks all neatly stacked up in piles, and this is, at first, maybe to an IT person, wow, this looks like a lot of work up ahead. But surprisingly, Chromebooks are the easiest and fastest to deploy devices in an educational setting. So a couple of use cases where I've seen Chromebooks used successfully in education. The primary use case we see is what's called one-to-one. And this is where each student gets his or her own Chromebook, and they typically keep it for the duration of the school year. Sometimes students get to keep it through the summer, but with turnover in student populations, that's typically not the norm. Chromebooks are expected to be brought from home and be fully charged and ready to be used during classroom instruction time. One of the benefits of Chromebooks, of course, is their long battery life. We're talking anywhere from 6.5 to 9 hours, depending on the model, and that allows the students as well as the teachers to deal with the instructional part of using technology as opposed to worrying about always keeping that battery topped off. It's funny, I think my Chromebook oftentimes lasts longer than my smartphone, and that's saying something for a device that's a laptop class device. Students would log in using their Google Apps for Education account. So it could be John student at myschool.edu, and then John would use his password to log in. This would give him access to all of his data that's stored in the cloud through applications such as Google Drive or any number of other educational-focused apps that are hosted on the web. Another consideration about one-to-one Chromebooks is many schools provide accidental damage insurance. These are still electronic devices and subject to damage if abused, and so as part of an RFP or bid for devices, many schools do go out and seek additional warranty coverage or insurance coverage in the case of accidental damage. So as far as some best practices in a one-to-one deployment, I've seen almost a third of the schools I work with go to one-to-one, either district-wide or at least in some classrooms or maybe a few campuses. Some of the best practices that I advocate here is to make sure that you do a phased deployment, meaning you start small with just a select pilot group or early adopters. Get the devices out there, test the robustness of the network, make sure the teachers and students are happy with the applications that have been selected, take that feedback, and then use it to iterate onto a larger population. Another part of the one-to-one deployment that should be carefully considered is help desk support or self-help resources. It's one thing that's common in schools, of course, are you're going to have lots of kids who are very interested in technology. So this might be a possible avenue to take advantage of some of these kids' passion and interest and deploy them in the role of a peer helper or almost like a genius bar type of capacity so that they can help out other students with their Chromebook needs. As far as services available, many of our Google and as well as Extreme Networks resellers offer capabilities anywhere from what we call white glove prep, which is ensuring that the Chromebooks are enrolled for management into your Google Apps domain, all the way through complete turnkey services where the Chromebooks show up already loaded in charging cards and everything is ready to go. So let's move on. One example, a strong example, I would say, of a one-to-one deployment is what we did in Chesterfield County, Virginia, where they were successfully able to deploy 14,000 Dell Chromebooks in a little bit less than one summer. And this was due in great part to the work that one of the resellers did on this project, which was to make sure the Chromebooks were fully enrolled, fully updated to the latest OS image, and all the peripherals were packed into a bundle. And on the first day of school, the students could be issued the Chromebooks, and they'll be able to keep them for the duration of the school year. So rolling out 14,000 anything is a pretty tough project, but at least with Chromebooks, it's a little bit easier. The next use case I'll talk about is the one-to-many use case. And this is where Chromebooks are stored in charging carts, and the carts are able to roam between classrooms, or the carts may actually stay stationary within one classroom. In this model, Chromebooks are typically charged overnight in the locked and secured carts. Students would still log in with their Google Apps for Education account. And one of the nice benefits of Chromebooks using this model is that we've deliberately designed the Chromebook to be the most shareable device, meaning that unlike some other devices where the students in first period may work on an essay and forget to log out, students in second period comes in and realizes, hey, I've got my essay already done. That doesn't happen on the Chromebook because each student has their own login, and therefore they're mapped to their own personal storage within Google Drive, and thus students aren't having any kind of cross-contamination of data, not unless they deliberately share the files with each other. So some best practices on the one-to-many use case. So a majority of schools I've come across do have one-to-many, and this is often used as a lower risk stepping stone towards a full one-to-one deployment. After all, if you can prove out that a set of 20 or 30 Chromebooks in one classroom can work, then moving on to a full one-to-one deployment, you've taken some of that guesswork out. Some suggested best practices: using 802. Using WPA2 with a pre-shared key is one of our suggested best practices just for simplicity. Now, this may go against what you have done in the past, but one of the nice things about the Chromebooks is the ability to push out network configuration from a cloud-based management console. So what this means is policies such as the Wi-Fi network's password can be pushed out by the IT administrator. It shows up on the Chromebook, and the user is not able to see or otherwise expose those credentials. The same management console can also be used to push out apps, set a default home page to go to, be able to set restrictions as far as who can log in or what applications or websites they can use. And all of these settings and policies can be pushed down with the click of a mouse to any Chromebook that's under your organization's management. And as long as they're connected to the internet, they'll be able to receive these updated policies. So let me move on to the next use case, and that's for student assessment. As we all know, there is somewhat of a focus on assessment in this country right now, and doing it electronically eases the burden of having to deal with things like scantrons that we used to in the previous generation. Chromebooks are absolutely secure for online testing purposes, and we've worked with organizations such as Park and Smarter Balance to come up with a set of guidelines on how to secure the Chromebooks in such a way that they are a good testing platform. So things like disabling the student's ability to browse the web during the exam, or use USB sticks to look at external files, taking screenshots, using printers, all that can be disabled from the same management console that I alluded to earlier. For the assessment use case, we would use what's called public session mode or single app kiosk mode. And what this does is it ensures that the user's session is ephemeral, meaning that as soon as the student is done with their session, with their testing, the Chromebook wipes out any data or any cache that might have been stored on the disk during the session. So something that we advocate on the assessment use case is from the management console, you can set up separate organization units. And you can actually set up an OU specifically for testing and move the Chromebooks into that OU in order to receive the specific testing policies. When the Chromebooks are ready to be returned to normal student usage mode, classroom mode, you simply would move the Chromebooks out of the testing OU and back into the normal OU. And we have an article specifically on our help site that talks about how to set up the Chromebook for assessment. Something that's very typical is, for example, setting the URL blacklist to star and the URL whitelist to just the website that's used for testing. That makes it pretty bulletproof. I'll touch a little bit on these adjacent use cases that may be interesting to your organization. So we have the ability to run virtualization clients on the Chromebook, Citrix receiver, VMware. We've got a Windows Remote Desktop client as well. These tools allow you to use Windows applications on the Chromebook that would otherwise just be a web-only device. Now, in education, what I've seen is the majority of schools are web-only, but you may have specific applications that are still on a legacy platform, and having a Citrix, VMware, or Windows RDP capability allows the Chromebook to access those applications. Okay, so Let me touch a little bit on the deployment life cycle. Really, the takeaway from this chart is the 4 horizontal boxes here. So think about your project management. Have a plan. That's the biggest thing I see among schools is if you do not have a plan, it's hard to know where you're going. So make sure you've got timeline and milestones defined along with crisp requirements and how those are going to be satisfied. The technical work stream. So for most of us, myself included, solving hard technical problems is interesting and fun, but we still have to realize that's only one portion of the entire project. So as soon as you get that first Chromebook online, it's gotten the policies, it can access the web, access the applications you need, then you should be good to go for the remaining 2 through N Chromebooks that you have. Change management and user adoption. This one I see as oftentimes making or breaking the project. So in education circles, we often call it professional development, and making sure that your teachers have the knowledge and skills to be able to effectively use the Chromebook in the classroom in a pedagogical context is crucial for the success of the project. Students, on the other hand, from my experience, don't really need a whole lot of training. You hand a Chromebook to the kids, they'll figure it out. I think the hardest thing is figuring out that a two-finger tap on the touchpad is a right click. Once you teach them that, everything else is taken for them. Finally, support. Making sure that you've got that help desk facility or someone to field user questions, be able to deal with cracked screens or warranty issues, and knowing what the escalation path is, whether that's to the hardware OEM or a reseller. If there's a software issue, Google offers 24/7 telephone support for Chrome OS or Google Apps questions. So some networking key decisions. Think about how much bandwidth you'll need. So one of the nice things about the Chromebook, as well as Google Apps, is that the bandwidth needs may actually be less than you would think. A big part of that, especially when we're talking about email, is things like spam don't actually come into your network because that is stopped at the Google Apps cloud level. Things like large attachments. If you've ever gotten a 25 megabyte PowerPoint and then done a reply to all attaching the original PowerPoint file plus your revised PowerPoint, you know how quickly those attachment sizes can balloon. Well, the nice thing about Gmail, that's part of the Google Apps Suite, for example, is that attachments are not downloaded until you deliberately want to download them. Otherwise, you can get a graphical preview of the PowerPoint or Excel file or Word document just by clicking the preview button, and that is on the order of tens of kilobytes as opposed to many megabytes. The most bandwidth-intensive application, of course, I would say, is any kind of streaming media, particularly videos like YouTube. So think about what is the maximum concurrent number of streams that your students or teachers may hope to use by campus or district-wide. Here, I would also say that a web caching appliance at your edge of network may help for certain types of media that your Chromebook may be trying to obtain from the web. Wi-Fi coverage, of course, is important. This is where a partner like Extreme Networks can really help play a crucial role in ensuring the technical success of the project. It's not just about dropping an access point in every single classroom and turning it on. You've got to make sure that you don't have radio frequency interference. You've got to make sure that the power on the access point is not turned up so high that they start interfering with adjacent access points. So making sure that you've got enough coverage as well as sufficient density is very crucial, and this is, again, something that extreme networks can help out with. As far as proxies and firewalls go, think about how you want to handle the traffic coming out of your network as well as coming in. Make sure that, of course, the Chromebooks are able to access Google. If you're going to be using an SSL inspecting web filter that requires a custom certificate, there may be some additional considerations that you'll have to pay attention to, and that the instructions for how to set up the Chromebooks with an SSL inspecting web filter are available through the Google Help Center. So just talking a little bit more about networking. So all Chromebooks support the 802.11 ABGN standards. Some of the newest models also support AC, although in a real-world environment, I would say it's pretty difficult to find an application or use case that would truly justify AC speeds. As far as encryption goes, I would say the preferred method is using, as I mentioned earlier, WPA2, pre-shared key, use AES along with 802.11n. That would give you the optimal network setup. So let me touch a little bit on 802.1x certificates, because I hear this question a lot. So Chromebooks do support 802.1x certificate at the user level. However, in a one-to-many deployment, this can be a little tricky, because then you're talking about managing a certificate for each user. So in a one-to-one deployment, if you really want to use 802.1x with certificates, I'd say go ahead. You can probably manage that. In a multi-user environment, that gets a little dicier, and that's where I suggest the WPA2 PSK method. And I've seen some schools actually set up a captive web portal to their firewall or web filter, and that allows the student to authenticate and then dictates the set of policies that they get for browsing the web. Captive web portal, this is not unlike what you would find at a hotel or at a Starbucks, and just make certain that the student agrees their terms of service and provides optionally an authenticated login. All right, so let me just touch on a few last points about networking. So I would say, as far as DNS goes, make sure that your DNS can be resolved as close to the user as possible. I've seen in many schools, they set up a star topology where each satellite campus has a link to a central data center, and that data center is what goes out to the internet. That's certainly doable. Just realize that you may experience a little bit of added latency due to that added hop. We have a guide called the Google Apps Networking Best Practices for Large Deployments, and that also touches on some tips for optimizing your network for the best performance when using Google Apps and Chromebooks. 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi networks, I would definitely suggest 5 gigahertz as opposed to your standard 2.4 gigahertz. You may have interference from anything like microwave ovens, baby monitors, or other sources of the 2.4 gigahertz band, and therefore 5 gigahertz will allow you to play above that highly congested 2.4 gigahertz range. All right. So let me lastly touch on professional development and getting more out of Chromebooks a couple of resources that are helpful, particularly to your teachers and instructional technologists. Google Educator Groups, these are communities of like-minded educators who are using Google tools and devices and can often help you learn new tips, or you can exchange best practices. So go to the google.com/landing/GEG page to learn more about a group in your area. The google.com/edu/training website has a wealth of self-paced e-learning modules that learn all about how to use tools like Google Sites, Google Docs, presentations in a classroom setting. And this one website, I would say, definitely bookmark it and take a look at the resources available to help your teachers understand how to maximize their usage of the Google tools. And finally, Google Teacher Academy is a training program that's led sometimes by Googlers, sometimes by instructional technologists in the community, and you apply for it, and it's a very competitive process, but once you come out as a Google certified teacher, that credential not only goes on your resume, but it demonstrates to others that you have a strong level of proficiency on using Google technology effectively in the classroom. So at this time, I think we have a poll question, and I can turn it back over to Bob.
Thanks, Edward. That was excellent. Thanks so much for that. And Edward will be sticking around for the Q&A session at the end. And there are some questions already coming in. But we did want to take a quick time out for a poll and see how you folks are using, what devices you're using. So if you could click on the devices that you're using within your district and check all that apply, we'll see what the profile is here. I'll just give you a minute. And let's see. Just another minute. And okay, let's see how it came out here. So now is everybody seeing that? There it is. Okay, so interestingly, PCs are strongest, the greatest common denominator. iPads and Chromebooks. When we did our survey, people expected that they still would use Windows, but probably declining a bit in the future. iPads, netbooks, and MacBooks. So interesting. Thank you all. As I mentioned, Extreme Networks, we provide the full range network solutions from edge to core. Our Wi-Fi solution called Identify provides the wired-like performance, security, and reliability for mobile BYOD user. And Edward was talking about the need to provide, have available high-density Wi-Fi. I'd like to point out as proof or testament to that, Extreme provides Wi-Fi for stadiums and arenas across the country, including the stadiums of both the Super Bowl participants, the Seattle Seahawks, and the New England Patriots. Our BYOD solution called Mobile IAM enables you to easily customize to a fine-grained resolution student access based on the user, who the user is, accessing the network, their device, their location, time of day, what application they're using, in fact, about 40 different variables. It can be connected to Active Directory. And of course, it's not just for BYOD, it works great for district-owned devices as well. I did want to point out one of our newest products called Purview provides network and application analytics It collects all the data, what's taking place on the network, and it's particularly, we're talking with customers who are using it, particularly useful preparing for and monitoring online testing and assessment. You can look at the network, how busy it is prior to the testing, make sure you've got plenty of capacity, and perhaps more importantly, during the testing, if an issue comes up, it allows you to instantly find out if the issue is within your network, is it with the pipeline to the internet, or is it in fact a problem at the remote server isn't giving you the performance you need. So it gives you a nice dashboard to keep right on top of that as you go. So with that, let me turn it back over to Mark Nelson, the Executive Director of Technology, who will describe their Chromebook implementation in Romeo, Michigan. Mark?
Thank you, Bob. And thanks for the time this morning to tell the story of Romeo Schools and how we came about deciding on using Chromebooks in our schools, how we built our network, and also at the end, I'll share some things that our teachers are doing, teachers and students are doing with the Chromebooks. So we have in our secondary schools, grades 6 through 12, a one-to-one implementation of about 3,500 Chromebooks. We do have a one-to-one deployment K through 12, and the decision was made for kindergarten through 5th grade to go with the iPads. The Chromebooks, again, are in grades 6 through 12. We're a medium-sized school district about 40 miles north of Detroit, roughly 24% in the National School Lunch Program, categorized by E-rate as suburban, and we have about 5,400 students in our schools. When we decided that we would make a move to Google Apps, it was in the summer of 2011, and a big portion of that decision came about as Novell was being acquired by Attachmate. We had been a Novell shop for all the years that I had been here, dating back to the late 90s. We used Novell NetWare, GroupWise, and obviously the Novell file storage and print management systems. When the acquisition was announced, we decided we were not going to continue, and we looked at our options. We did look at some of the things that were available at the time, but it was, for us, I believe, a pretty simple choice, a pretty clear choice to go with Google Apps for Education. We did then also convert our internal servers to Microsoft and Active Directory. And from the very beginning, we chose to sync our Active Directory accounts with Google Apps using the Google Apps Directory Sync tool. And every night, those accounts were synced, and email accounts are created or disabled based on the group memberships and all of those kinds of things. So from the beginning, we integrated the two systems. One of the benefits of moving to Google Apps for Education, the biggest benefit, I would say, in my mind, was the fact that it was completely free. So we immediately saved tens of thousands of dollars moving to Google from an annual maintenance contract, an annual software support contract that had been in place for many years with Novell. When we looked at moving to Google, I remember seeing presentations and truly buying into the fact that the world's information lives on the web. Google fully understands that, and I think that even before Chromebooks were developed, Google Apps really had that in mind, and that was another big decision for us, big reason for the decision. We also chose Google because it had already become quite popular with many of our users, and most students and most staff members already had Google accounts. They were very familiar with Google and email at the time and all the things that people were doing with their own Google accounts. So it made the transition from the familiarity of Novell to Google, very simple, and it was a smooth transition. In the technology department, we really did enjoy the ease of use of the management console. That was a very simple product to learn and gave us a lot of control over our domain. And with a very familiar organizational unit style, we were very easily able to set up our domain. In the early part of 2012, shortly after we had made the transition to Google Apps, the district decided to go to the public for a technology bond. They had been unsuccessful in a couple of previous attempts when a bond proposal was combined with, for instance, athletic facilities, or in another case, building a new high school and doing some very major changes with boundary changes and things like that. So what happened in early 2012 was a proposal to the community that was technology only, and that was named Connected for Success. And even though it was technology only, it passed by a very slim margin. And I bring that up because I think from the outset, everyone understood that we would really be scrutinized. We would really need to make good decisions with lots of research data and lots of background on all the decisions we made. We involved the public from the very beginning, and I think we always understood that from the start, and we did a lot of public relations as we went around and explained to the different parent groups, and I believe the superintendent did some local media appearances to explain why technology was so important in education and why we really needed an upgrade not only to our network infrastructure, which was aging and really just had some sporadic access points here and there, as well as making a real move towards getting technology into the hands of every student, and thereby creating the parity that we were looking for, and all of those types of things, and being able to develop a very consistent, stable curriculum across all of our schools and all of our students. We do have a very involved superintendent and assistant superintendent, excuse me, that understand the importance of technology and the way it's changing education. And so I'll give you an example of that. Next month, the entire district will be closed for 2 days while every single staff member attends the McCall conference in downtown Detroit. So I think that's quite innovative. I don't know of other districts that have done that. There may be some, but I think that doing so really stresses how the superintendent and the assistant recognize the importance of educational technology, and to that end, those 2 days are professional development for teachers in that conference setting. We began, of course, with the wired and wireless network infrastructure. We are an extreme shop from top to bottom, from our core switch all the way to our edge switches, and every access point is both our wired and wireless network is 100% extreme. Some of the other projects that went along with the bond proposal were, as I've already mentioned, the devices for every student, K through 12. We did some electrical upgrades, and we also went through every single classroom installing an interactive projector, a sound system, computer, document camera, those types of things. So our classrooms really are prepared to move ahead into the future. I want to just talk a little bit about how we came about some of the decisions that we made. Again, making sure that we were able, along every step of the way, to have a very well thought out plan. This is a diagram here of what we did as far as organizing how we would come to the decisions we were making. So we had a steering committee at the top of a few key people. A little bit below that, we obviously had the financial review people because there was such a great deal of money at stake and so many decisions to be made as far as that goes. The advisory panel we had was consisting mainly of teachers. There were a couple parents on there as well. But what I think worked well for us was these 5 work groups that we put together. And I'll just briefly talk about them. The communications work group was led by the superintendent and a parent, and they had the charge of how they would explain to the local newspaper, the local cable channel, what we were doing, what our plans were, answer questions from the public. They traveled to PTOC meetings and things like that to really get as involved as they could with communicating our steps along the way. The second group was the technology platform group, which I was a part of, along with a school board member. And it was our task to determine what technology we would place in the hands of the student and why. So which device, in other words, would best suit our students. And we looked at iPads, we looked at Chromebooks, we looked at Windows 8 tablets, we looked at Android tablets, we looked at a number of different things and came to decisions and had discussions about which device would be in the hands of students and why. The policies work group talked about what would we do for insurance, things like that, theft, loss, how would we handle those types of things. PD group is pretty self-explanatory. Once we decided on the device, how would we get teachers trained and comfortable using the device with their students? And then lastly, teaching and learning kind of goes along with that. That was put together and headed up by 3 teachers, 3 of our probably most tech-savvy teachers. One of them is a Google certified teacher. And that group really delved into lesson planning and content creation and things like that. Now, each one of these work groups had many other members. We met in the evenings, and we had good, productive meetings. It was funny because I think as we went along through this, we always said, not about the device, it's about how we're changing education, teaching and learning, and so on. But it seems like every one of these other work groups kind of waited on the technology platform group until they knew which device they were going to receive. And some of them said that, for instance, policies couldn't be created if they weren't sure which device it was going to be. But once we hammered all that out, things did come together pretty quickly. This is just a quick vision that the committee came up with about what we wanted to do with our technology, and really just 3 key words here on this slide. The 3 words the committee came up with: they wanted students to be inspired, have them explore, and of course, ultimately achieve. There are a number of bullet points under there. It's kind of hard to read, but some of the things that they wanted them to do was they wanted to make sure that they would spend a great deal of their time online, and they would change the way education happened both in school and outside of school, with an online experience being the main component of the way education would be delivered. As I said, the policies and procedures that we ended up putting in place, and I can explain some of the reasoning behind it, but we did decide that we would be self-insured for damage and loss. We looked at the premiums that would be charged per device and decided that we felt like our damage and loss rate would be low enough that it would make more sense to just self-insure and pay for our own damage and loss. We decided on a tiered approach. So as a student, if a student drops a Chromebook and the screen cracks, the first incident is $25, no matter what it costs the district to get that paid. We did want them to have a small stake in the game, but we didn't want to hit them up for hundreds of dollars for an accident. So we decided on $25 for the first incident, $50, and then for the third incident, it seemed to be maybe a pattern for some students, or we decided on $250 for the third incident. Parents can opt out. They do not have to take them home, but they are expected, the ones that do go home, to come to school everyday charged. There is no facilities for charging the Chromebooks at school. And I heard Edward mention earlier that most districts probably don't allow them to go home through the summer. Our superintendent did want them to go home through the summer, and they did, both the iPads and the Chromebooks. When we were planning our network, this really was phase one. What we did here, what I wanted to show, which I hope you can see, is we didn't really focus on an access point per school. What we did was focused on how many devices needed to connect at a certain bandwidth in certain spaces. So it ended up in the highlighted room there, which is a media center on the drawing, that would be a designated as a space type number 3, which would have 60 devices connected at 3 megabits per second. That's how we designed the entire network. So the successful bidder would have to provide that throughput, and we wouldn't really be purchasing a certain number of access points. What we wanted there was the coverage and the density. We chose the, actually Extreme was the only bidder in the process that included an access point with a third spatial stream, and we chose the AP3710 for the wireless access point, which is a high performance, high density, enterprise class access point that it has really served very well. I would stress and emphasize, like the others have, that network density has to be the first thing that you look at, because it's obvious that to put thousands of devices on a network that can't handle the load will just cause much frustration and many problems. We have not had a problem at all with our network from day one. We were, I do realize, very fortunate to have a bond and be able to start from the very top and go all the way to, you know, the edges, and with access points. Everything is brand new on our network, so I do realize how fortunate we were there. A lot of districts don't have that luxury. But that's just a little about how we designed our network coverage and the throughput capacity. I mentioned earlier the advisory committee that we put together, the ETLT we called the Educational Technology Leadership Team. And that advisory committee was made up of about 25 people. And we spent an entire day, after we had things narrowed down to iPads versus Chromebooks, we spent an entire day evaluating the two devices and came up with our elementary and secondary model that we ended up implementing. When we had Chromebooks selected for the secondary schools, we had teachers evaluate and look at a couple of different models for a period of a couple weeks, and we settled on the Lenovo X131. We chose a Santa Claus method, is what we called it, for distribution. We got them arranged by class and dropped them off at the schools the night before they were going to be delivered. The next morning, students came in, teachers came in. Teachers were, they were responsible to deliver their classroom set of 30 or 32 Chromebooks to their students. It all went very well, and people were very excited and very happy that that entire day was devoted to Chromebook lessons. As I said, I think that some of the things that we learned were that the network infrastructure must be the priority. You know, the technology and curriculum departments became closer and closer. I think that we ended up delegating support to schools, where we did actually change some roles and responsibilities. And then lastly, I would just say that we had many contributors. Extreme was a big part of it, obviously Google, and then we did have a number of local companies help us as well. I think I'm just about out of time. I'm going to turn this back over to Bob.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mark. I can see why you've been so successful implementing your Chromebook program out there. So let me quickly wrap up to make sure that we've got plenty of time for questions. And I just want to make a couple closing points. At Extreme Networks, we take extreme pride in offering the best support, taking the best care of our customers. And we have an especially deep experience supporting Chromebooks in the classroom with our network infrastructure. So we're very familiar with the network requirements of Chromebooks. When you call us for help, it's definitely not the first time we've encountered those devices. And we provide the best network support for Chromebooks simply because we provide the best network products. We take pride in providing the best support in being the easiest to do business with. You'll find lots of resources at our website, specifically our K-12 solution pages there. Some of the things you'll find are the case studies specifically with the districts that we've sold to that have implemented Chromebooks. Quite a number of variety of large school districts, smaller districts, and everything in between. On social media, we've written a number of blogs certainly on K-12, but also Chromebooks and using Chromebooks and other devices for online testing, digital citizenship, emerging trends in adaptive learning, all at our website, accessible at the website at the blogs. And you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook. So in summary, Extreme Networks provides better connections, better experiences for everyone. So now let me turn it back to Andrew, and we'll field the questions. I know a number of the questions have been answered in chat, but we'll bring that up for everybody. And if we do run out of time, we'll be continuing answering questions at our online community called The Hub, and that's at community.extremenetworks.com. We'll carry the questions that we've answered, and new questions we'll field there at The Hub. So, Andrew?
All right, well, thank you very much, Bob, and thank you as well to Edward and Mark for sharing your insights about using Chromebooks. We have run quite long here, so we only have actually 3 minutes left. For those questions that haven't already been answered in the Q&A console, as Bob said, any that we don't get to right now can be found on the forum that Bob was talking about. So we have 2.5 minutes, so let's just take a couple and then we will sign off. So the first question I think probably goes to Mark. And Mark, the question is, does Romeo Schools, do you charge a technology fee in addition to, I think, incident fees?
No, we don't. The only charges we have are the incident fees.
Okay. All right. And then let me come back to Edward. There was a question coming out of Virginia about Chesterfield County. And how is Chesterfield County using Chromebooks for assessment when Chromebooks like Android and iOS do not run Java?
That's correct. This is Edward. That's correct. Chromebooks do not run Java. They do run Adobe Flash. In the state of Virginia specifically, they use Pearson TestNev 7.5, which does rely on Java, and so it doesn't work on anything other than Windows or Mac using the legacy Java plugin, which itself is considered insecure. TestNev 8, which is used in many other states, does not rely on Java. It works great on the Chromebook.
Okay. Terrific. Well, let's come back to Mark. Mark, have you found good ways to keep the students from being distracted by the Chromebooks while the teacher is teaching in front of the classroom?
I think that's mainly up to the teachers. We do have a product called Hapara Teacher Dashboard, which includes a remote control function. I don't think many teachers use it. For the most part, I believe it's lids up or lids down kind of a thing, and they just monitor their own classroom.
Okay. And then, Bob, maybe this comes back to you. I'm not sure. Do we have a question from the audience who wants to know? The question is, how much problem are you finding with Chromebooks? We have a lot of charger issues. Our main problem is students bringing Chromebooks not charged. Do you have the same issue? This maybe also goes to Mark.
Yeah, Mark might handle that. From what I've found talking with different schools, they handle it different ways. Some students that come in with a Chromebook uncharged, they have to take a trip to the loaner department and fill out a form and try to encourage them so it never happens again. And others, they're just without a device for that day. But Mark, anything to add there?
That's how we do it. We have a 3 strikes policy where we let them charge. You know, they can plug them in the first couple times, and the third time they are without a device for the day.
Okay. Well, great. Sadly, that is all the time we have left. There are a lot more questions that went unanswered. Just as a reminder, you will be receiving an email with a link to the recording, and some of you are also asking about URLs for an article that was referenced in the presentation. We will include that in the email as well. So as we wrap up, I just want to thank Bob Nilsson, Edward Doan, and Mark Nelson for their excellent presentations. I'd also like to thank Extreme Network for its support. And as I said before, final reminder, we will send you all an email that will allow you to get a PDF of the slides and a recording of this whole presentation. Thank you all.